Tonight on Revolutionaries.
To me, there was nothing more valuable than being able to change the reality in our world, which is that all too often people we love are lost because you find out too late in the disease progression process to be able to do anything about it.
Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford at 19 to start a biotech company. Today that company, Theranos, is worth billions and still under the radar. Meet this groundbreaking scientist and founder, Elizabeth Holmes, in conversation with KQED's Michael Krasny. Major funding for Revolutionaries is provided by the Intel Corporation.
Well, thank you all for that warm welcome, and let me tell you how pleased I am to be here with Elizabeth Holmes. Been an admirer from afar, and must tell you that she's a recent recipient of the Horatio Alger Award, which in some ways is appropriate. It's a kind of Horatio Alger story, which I hope I'll be able to flesh out in our conversation. Also, I believe her brother is here, and her mentor, Professor Robertson, is here. Could they maybe just signal where they are? They may come up in the course of conversation as well. So just wanted to formally welcome them and welcome you, Elizabeth. Congratulations on the Horatio Alger Award.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, let's talk about how you got to be here or where you are. If we go back, I think we have to look at your lineage initially, because your great-grandfather was an inspiration, your parents were inspirations. I mean, this whole vision of yours and making a difference and doing the kinds of things that you're now doing to really revolutionize healthcare, go back in a sense to childhood and to really your genealogy in many ways.
Well, I grew up in a family that was very focused on the belief that we're all here for a reason, and we're here to try to make this world a better place, and that we have a purpose. And for me, I thought I was going to do what my dad did, which was work in disaster relief, because I grew up in a house in which I was surrounded by pictures of him helping people all over the world when really bad things happened. And over time, I started to see business as a vehicle for making a change in the world, because you have total control over what you decide to do and how you decide to do it. Whereas, sometimes people who work in public policy aren't able to fully influence all the things they want to do or the changes they want to see. And so from a pretty early age, I started thinking about that path.
Well, talking about early age, this is, many of you know I'm a literature professor, and this is a young lady who read the whole of Herman Melville's Moby Dick at the age of 9, which in itself is a pretty colossal feat. So there was something stirring in you even earlier on, and as I understand it, actually I won't get into too much literature because we're both fans of Jane Austen. I said we could do a whole hour just in conversation on Jane Austen.
Yeah, that's good.
But when you went off to school, your dad gave you Marcus Aurelius. This is the last mention, perhaps, of something in the realm of books. But it had an effect, and at that point, I believe, you had already started dealing with Chinese universities. You had, as a high school student, you were fluent in Mandarin at that point. All of that kind of, well, call it motivation, because that's really what it is, was really pretty much visiting you at that point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that focus on a life of purpose struck me very deeply, and everything that we do now and the way we've done it, the way we've built it, has been about that.
You were drawn to medicine, but then I guess you realized as a kid, I'm sorry to tell about your trepidations here, but you were terrified of getting blood drawn.
Still am.
Still am, yeah. Okay, and you said, I mean, you've compared it to torture.
Yeah.
You've said that there's nothing else that you're afraid of, really, as much as you are afraid of getting blood drawn.
That is true.
So this all seemed to converge in many ways, really, didn't it?
It did. When I decided to start this company, it was about understanding that laboratory information drives 80% of clinical decisions. Yet we know more about our credit cards than we do about our lab data. And this information is instrumental in being able to see the onset of disease in time for therapy to be effective, because so many of us, when I spent time thinking about, what is the most valuable thing that I could do with my life, to me there was nothing more valuable than being able to change the reality in our world, which is that all too often people we love are lost because you find out too late in the disease progression process to be able to do anything about it. And the fact that making laboratory testing more accessible is a way to help change that. And that as part of that, we can get rid of the big bad needle. That was sort of an added bonus.
Yeah, that's icing on that cake. But a lot of young people have these dreams, these idealistic dreams, and think, I want to make a difference. I want to do something that will contribute to humanity. But you, as a chemical engineering student, realized to some extent you had to have a patent or two. I mean, that's where it all really began, didn't it?
It did. You have to have, we believe, here in Silicon Valley, we're a product company, we're a technology company. We believe very much in the ability to help contribute to solving policy issues through technology and through innovation, and this country has seen the benefits of that in terms of its impact economically and otherwise. The patent is a tool for being able to ensure that we do see this technology applied in such a way in which it does make that impact. And so that was one of the first steps in beginning to build our portfolio.
But you had also had some experience, again, in China with working on SARS, didn't you?
I did, in Singapore.
Yeah. And you had this professor whom I mentioned before, Professor Robertson, who now is emeritus and now is with your company.
Yes.
And from my understanding, you went to him and you said, I'm ready to work with the PhD candidates. Pretty much a freshman. I mean, not with that kind of egocentricity. I didn't mean to suggest that, but you were indeed ready to do that and were pretty much chomping at the bit to get started, so much so that you convinced him. You were obviously convinced and had the conviction inwardly and had the agency. And so you move forward on this. What about dropping out of school, though? I mean, again, you had your parents' support. They were pretty much behind you because they saw how purposeful you were, really.
No, I was very lucky because they could have made that very difficult. But they'd saved their whole life for my brother and I to be able to go to college, and they let me take that money that otherwise would have been used for their retirement to put into starting this company. And
you should mention you were a presidential scholar also, yeah.
Yeah, and I found what I loved. I found what I wanted to spend my life doing, and so there was never sort of a plan to drop out of Stanford. But I was spending all my time doing this, and I
still are.
I still am. I always will be. But I learned what I needed to learn to be able to do it, and so that was it.
So the adventure began, and let's talk about, I want to talk about the company and establishing it and so forth, but before we get there, what about the idea of, because Peter Thiel has been an advocate, as you probably know, in Silicon Valley, one of the founders of PayPal. There's a whole 60 Minutes piece on this of, if you've got a bright idea, an inventive idea, maybe you should not consider a liberal arts education. I mean, I don't think he was necessarily isolating science educations, and you were studying chemical engineering. But what about that idea? Because, Zuckerberg didn't have a college degree, and Bill Gates didn't have a college degree, and Steve Jobs, we keep hearing this. Do you feel that it's advisable for young women who have these kind of dreams, or young men, to give up college if they believe in themselves? Because you're pretty rare in terms of the success you've had and the mind you have.
I think it depends on why they're considering pursuing whatever it is that they want to pursue and what they really want to do. We have phenomenal PhDs and scientists in our company who are changing the world and changing people's lives every day through what they do. And their training and their experience and their research is being applied here in extremely powerful ways. If people want to start a company, the first question that I always ask is, why, right? Why a company? Why not, a research project? And I think if people really understand why they're doing it, if there's a mission that they love so much that no matter how hard it is, they want to keep doing it because they found what they love, then absolutely. But sometimes I think people get a little excited about the concept of starting a company, quote unquote, and I think if that's something you really want to do, then you need to really understand why, because you're going to be able to do a lot better at it.
But you really had the convictions right from the get-go, didn't you? I mean, you not only wanted to start a company, you believed that you could start a company and really have it do the kinds of things that you wanted it to do, this mission of helping people, saving lives.
Yeah. I had the conviction that this is what I want to spend my life doing. And if I had to start a company and fail 1,000 times and start it over again and fail, I would do that. And so when I realized that, then it was about doing whatever it takes to make this a reality, because it's a change that can happen and has to happen in our world.
No regrets about missing homecoming dances and all those kinds of things?
No, although sometimes I wonder if I'm sort of frozen in time from back in those days. But no, I mean, I feel like the luckiest person in the world because I get to live every single day knowing that even in a small way, I've done something that's made someone's life better. And I had the chance to talk to people. I was in Arizona on last Friday and listened to them about what this has meant to them in terms of cancer patients and what they go through right now and how broken down they are and their families are by just the amount of blood that they have to give, and seeing someone so emotional and knowing that you've changed that. I mean, to me, that's the purpose of life, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't all start in a garage for you either, like it has for some people.
It started in a basement. Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
I mean, but you've been so devoted to this life of yours and this mission of yours that in many ways, your life is almost, as I read it, ascetic. I mean, monkish or something along those lines. Yeah. I imagine you with your kale and she's a vegan and all your green concoctions and everything, but just being at that job constantly.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah. It's, I wasn't always that way, but it's evolved because it's a way to give more and more of yourself to what it is that you love, and this is really hard, and it's really big, and it takes everything. And I've tried to train myself to live in such a way in which I can give my life to it.
It's very noble and admirable. Let's talk about how it started, though. I mean, just briefly, give us a sense of how you went out and raised this capital, first of all. I mean, you had people like Larry Ellison and some of the venture capitalists behind you, but also, there was mention of your board, which is an extraordinary board with some of the most prominent and two former secretaries of state. Actually, George Shultz has had how many cabinet positions?
4.
Yeah. But you have this all-star team behind you, and so talk a bit about how those things were engendered. That is, the capital on the one hand and the board on the other.
Yeah. Well, I think when I first started raising money, the question that was often asked when I walked in the room was, "What's your exit strategy?" And I'm sitting there kind of thinking about my entry strategy. And so I really tried to find people who had built great companies for the long term and really understood what that meant. And I mean, our tradition, Silicon Valley, the whole venture capital business was started by people who were in it to invest in people, who had great ideas and wanted to build great companies for the long term. And so we turned down the first monies that were offered to us. I turned down because I didn't think that they would invest in us for the reasons that I wanted them to. And we were very lucky to end up finding a group of people who had personally been involved in building great companies for the long term and got them involved in this. And likewise, I mean, the board that we have the privilege of having is a group of people who really understand what it means to make a difference in the world and want to do good, fundamentally. That's why they're involved in this, because they see it as something that does have the potential to change our healthcare system and apply technology to solving a policy issue which has very profound consequences at a macro level. And so, I've had the chance to get to know these people in different aspects of our work, and we've been able to assemble just a brilliant group from a strategic perspective who can really sit down and think through what's the right way to do this, and how do we make sure we do it in a way that really does realize our mission.
Somebody once said of you, she's a lot like Steve Jobs, except she's got a much kinder heart. I didn't mean to insult Steve Jobs, but but the fact of the matter is that in some ways he's been a model to you. I know. I mean, even in the black attire.
Yeah.
And in many respects, you're trying to do a lot of what he did, but with heart and with a sense of compassion. And it seems to me that what you really have in mind, in many respects, and tell me if I'm wrong, barking up the wrong tree here, but is a whole new concept of preventive medicine.
That's exactly right. And I'm a tremendous admirer of what Jobs did. I think he was a genius in the context of his work. I do have to disclose that I've been in black turtlenecks since I was 7. But
you were reading Moby Dick and still wearing that?
That's thanks to my mother, but I got used to it. I think that this question about preventative medicine is about the individual, and it's about the consumer. And there's this incredible opportunity that we have to connect and engage with individuals in such a way in which they can begin to love the products and services that result in changing their lives. And this space, this healthcare space, has not been an area, lab testing particularly, that people love. They do not leave a lab visit saying, that was awesome, let's do it again. And they should, because it's the first step in beginning to get information that changes their life. And if they begin to understand that they can use this information, I talk all the time about type 2 diabetes, which drives 20% of United States healthcare costs and is completely reversible through diet and exercise and lifestyle, yet
you're looking at a living
we
example.
have, there you go. Yeah,
I got the diagnosis, I changed and brought the blood sugar down and everything.
Yeah.
But I had to have those vials by the phlebotomist,
Right,
as a result.
right, no, exactly. But there's 80 million Americans who are pre-diabetic. 90% of them don't know that they are, right? And the point about that is when people begin to understand that, when you see your lab values and you see the lab values of people who ended up being really, really sick, it's a powerful moment in terms of behavior modification. And that engagement in terms of a product, in terms of a service, in terms of this legacy that we have in Silicon Valley of building great products that people love, is a huge opportunity because we can create an experience that's wonderful, that people do love. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of with what we've done so far is that we get tons of emails from people saying that this was so much fun and they want to go do it again, right? And the more we can change that paradigm, the more we'll realize our mission.
A lot of it, I don't know if the name Tom Ferguson is familiar at all to you, but he was one of the pioneers in self-help medicine and so forth, and a lot of that was geared toward preventive medicine in many ways. But what he never could have conceived of was what you have now with, I mean, isn't a vision to have, like within a mile or within a few miles, these kind of availabilities of testing? I mean, now you've got the Walmarts, and that in itself, you know, was quite an accomplishment to have.
Walgreens,
but down the line, we're talking global, aren't we?
Well, it has huge implications at a global level because in so many of these countries, in the same way in which the cell phone infrastructure leapfrogged over the lack of landline infrastructure, there is no equivalent landline infrastructure in terms of traditional testing. And so the opportunity to put a distributed or decentralized testing infrastructure in place is the opportunity to begin building a decentralized care delivery system. And if we can do that, then we can start changing people's lives in a very material way. So it's an extremely important part of our mission. And likewise in the US, I mean, I've had so many conversations with people who talk just about, for example, driving to the VA, right? The amount of distance that they have to travel to be able to do something like get a blood test done in order to be able to get the care they need is shocking.
Think of what you're doing for the carbon footprint just alone. Right?
Yeah, that's true. And so, you know, this mission is about engagement. It's about access. The tiny samples, a way to engage people in access. The locations are a way to engage people in access. And in the same way, I mean, people should be able to go get their blood tested on a Sunday night without going to an emergency room. And they should be able to do that on a Sunday morning and late at night after work during the week. And so it's all part of engagement.
Well, and the key to the success, I think, on a number of occasions you've said, is inexpensive and transparency. And actually, it sounds like I'm promoting you here, which I'm not, because I want to get into some criticism and get your response to it. But there's the notion that that you want to work with the FDA. I mean, you've said this on a number of occasions. You want regulation. You welcome regulation. Yeah.
We do, and that is seen by some as highly controversial. But the way that I've always looked at it is that we only realize our mission if the information that we generate is actionable. And the information will only be actionable if it's of the highest levels of integrity. And so to ensure that, we've got to do a lot of work and spend a lot of money on a lot of clinical trials. And if we're going to do that, why would we not submit? And that bar, I mean, the reason that we want to work with FDA on this is that it's the greatest stamp of quality that we can get in terms of demonstrating the integrity of what we do. So it's extremely important to us, and we're deeply committed to it. And we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we create a model for that.
I want to talk about competition on a couple of different levels. MRIs and other things technology is moving forward in a lot of different ways without necessarily taking any blood. And how do you see that? I mean, with your periscope around the corner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the legacy of Silicon Valley is about obsoleting yourself, right? And,
that's right.
And that's something that we spend a lot of time on ourselves, and it's something that's really important to us in terms of how we have organized our company. I think that the potential of laboratory testing in the context of preventative medicine is so transformative, we don't even understand how transformative it is right now. So for example, we've done some work with people at Hopkins who have developed and demonstrated that in blood, you can see the onset of pancreatic cancer 17 years before a tumor forms, right? So you do not want to be figuring out that someone you love has cancer by imaging and seeing a tumor. You want to see it 17 years before it shows up, because that's when you have a shot at doing something about it. And if we can, through blood, through lab testing, make it possible to do that, then we can realize this vision. So we're doubling down right now.
Well, good luck on that score. And when you're talking about pancreatic cancer, it made me think again of Steve Jobs, who unfortunately succumbed to that, a rare form of it.
Yeah.
But there's also been a lot of concern about the trade secret issue with respect to your company. I call it your company because it is 50% yours.
It's our company.
Okay. Well, it has your name and your brand on it. It's very humble of you, but you know, it has been associated with you and it will continue to be. I'm just wondering, I mean, with your leadership, but I'm wondering about this sense of secretiveness and all. I know you've had some litigation and concern about trade secrets, and any company to get started and get on the move has to be concerned with that. But what about the accusation that things are just too secretive, that you know you should be publishing more in peer-reviewed journals, you should be talking more about your methods of technology, these kinds of things. Ken Aletta, by the way, wrote all about this in a profile of Elizabeth in the New Yorker. But how do you respond to all that? Because it's critical, usually.
We understand that our competition would like us to tell them how we do everything that we do. But you know, I've always believed we spent 10 years in stealth mode. We basically had nothing on our website. We never did any interviews, no press. And we did that because we were creating something that has the potential to do what we're talking about right now. And there was no reason for us to talk about it until we'd done it, right? And hyping this up does not serve any purpose, right? So there's a lot of companies that go out and they publish all this stuff because they're trying to show that they've got the next greatest thing, and that's not relevant for us. We're interested in serving people and serving physicians, and so what's relevant there is FDA and the body called CLIA, which regulates us. And whereas traditional labs are very aggressively fighting FDA regulation and have not ever submitted any of their laboratory developed tests to FDA, we think it's really important. And so we're doing that. And we have, you know, we released our first publication this year, but where we do a publication, in our opinion, it needs to be about something that people publish about. No lab goes out there and does a publication saying my lab test works. The regulators make sure your lab test works. What they do go out and publish is this test, for example, is predictive of this, right? So our first publication was on the ability to do this type of testing in patients who are septic in a hospital. So when you're infected and your bacteria gets into your bloodstream, there's a tremendous need for very rapid measurements to be able to figure out how to administer an antibiotic. And that's what we published around, right? And so we'll keep doing that. But we're going to keep doing that because it serves our mission in some way. And that's what matters to us.
I'm sorry, I just did a program, some of the listeners, I mean, members of the audience may know, on superbugs and resistance to antibiotics. We don't necessarily need to go there, but we go instead to the whole sense of running a business, because there's a lot of problems, obviously, when you have people, you have about 500 people, I believe now, and you know, there's human error and there's all the difficulty, all the draggy things about doing a business too, you know, deliveries and getting lab people to get the results out and all of those sorts of things. I mean, in many respects, has that been a different kind of challenge for you and maybe in some ways even more challenging because you mounted this with all of this passion and with all of this commitment and sense of purpose?
Well, we have an extremely long-term mindset, and so we've got over 700 people now, and we've designed our infrastructure differently because we're a technology company, and so in the same way in which we've seen software totally transform traditional businesses like retail, for example, we're able to apply technology exactly to automate much of what was done manually in the past to mitigate human error. And that's the premise around which we're building this company, and that allows us to develop this infrastructure in such a way in which we can also price at incredibly low price points so that testing can become affordable. So, you know, we said when we launched this consumer business, for lack of a better word, that we would pursue what the Walgreens CEO calls a crawl, walk, run model, and we've been spending a lot of time in the crawl phase to make sure we really understand how to be excellent in all of those areas, in call center and the logistics, because that is absolutely central to being able to realize our mission. And so we're spending a lot of time on it, and we really believe in the power of technology in that context, because fundamentally, if you talk about a clinical analyzer, that architecture has not changed since 1960, when Beckman and Coulter here, you know, invented some of the first automated clinical analyzers.
So what do you envision moving along on the trajectory you're on now in terms of the future of your company, of the company? I mean, particularly in the sense of speeding up perhaps the pace. I mean, you're moving so quickly now. But do you want to move it faster? Do you want to move it even less expensive? You said a lot of these prices are incredibly inexpensive, and they are compared to what's paid for Medicare, Medi-Cal, or hospital tests and so forth. You want to keep getting, as so many technologists have, the prices even down lower?
Absolutely. We are spending a massive amount of resources. We announced when we started this work, I guess it was just about a year ago, in the consumer and physician space, that we were going to price our tests at less than 50% off of what Medicare and Medicaid are willing to pay. So if they're saying you can send in a bill for $100, we're sending one in for $50. And we've since begun dropping the really important tests down to 90% off of their reimbursement rates. And we think that's fundamental, because no person should have to walk away from getting a medical service because they can't afford it. And so we're going to do whatever it takes.
So how does this tie in with the Affordable Care Act?
It's a complicated question. You know,
we just had testimony today from the MIT professor who spoke about the lack of intelligence of the American people. So this is somewhat timely, but yeah, how do you see it connecting? Testimony on the Capitol Hill.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what that testimony was about. I really believe in.
He said he was stupid.
Okay.
He was stupid for calling American people stupid.
Yeah. No. I mean, I really believe in the intelligence of the American people. I think that what we need to do in healthcare is empower the American people, because they do care. And if you educate them and you give them the tools, I believe they will change in whatever ways they can to help improve their own outcomes. And so the Affordable Care Act, you know, puts additional focus on quality and cost in the ways that it was designed. But fundamentally, irrespective of policy or, you know, whatever systems are in place, people care about saving money, and hospital systems care about it, insurance companies care about it, people care about it, because now even if they're insured, what's happening is their deductibles are increasing at such a rate that they're still having to pay, in the lab testing case, often thousands of dollars out of pocket, even though they have insurance. And so, certainly the system will change because of it, and I think everybody is still trying to understand exactly how, but this work that we do, we're lucky in that it's nonpartisan and it's really policy independent, because these core tenets of cost savings and our mission of getting rid of the need for people to have big needles stuck in their arms holds true in terms of its relevance, irrespective of whatever the policy of the day is, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. And you mentioned the Johns Hopkins study about 17 years out with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
Are there other kinds of things down the line or that you foresee that people would want to know, particularly in terms of diagnostic possibilities that research is showing or leading to?
I mean, I think what's so powerful about it is that people don't really understand it, and because it's been such a controlled thing, they've not engaged in it and used it to try to help make their life better. So I also often talk about the fact that it's illegal here in California for me to order a lab test that would tell me if I have an allergy to a peanut. And I can go buy a gun and I can kill myself, but I can't order that lab test because, I might stop eating peanuts, and that would just be a big problem for society. So, when you talk about a system where until earlier this year, it was also illegal, even if I got my physician to order that lab test for me in many states, for me to get a copy of the results, right, of my own body. I called the doctor's office, say I want a copy, and in a lot of states in this country, until there was a policy shift this year, you could not retain your own copy of your own data about your own body. And so I think the first most basic thing there is that when people understand that you can get this information and that it's useful, and also that you can change it. I mean, your example about what you did in the context of your own health is exactly it, because that's how so many of these diseases can help to be managed or reversed. And I think if we can create engagement around that, then I certainly believe that over time it will become more and more predictive, but it's life-changing, right? Even at this very basic level of the tests that are already out there right now.
Do you have concerns about privacy, though, with respect to personal data, or how do you protect that? How do you particularly create security around that issue?
We're tremendously concerned about it. We put, in all of our documents and materials that we give to the people we serve, that we will never sell their data, period. We will never advertise on it, period. And we
heard that from Facebook, I think, too. Sorry.
We really strongly believe that individuals own their own health information. And if they tell us that they want it sent somewhere, then we're going to try to make sure every single time that they really want it sent somewhere, until they tell us that they don't want us to keep asking them, that they want to send it wherever they want to send it. And that's the way we've designed our whole system. I think that that's really fundamental in the context of health information, because people don't understand what happens when it gets into the wrong hands and how it's used. And so creating secure systems and distributed systems that can be designed for the sole purpose of protecting individuals' information and giving them complete control over it and complete transparency over it is really, really core to us.
We'll take questions from the audience, but I'm just wondering, if you could perhaps even more illuminatingly, and the conversation so far has been indeed quite enlightening, but talk about what you see ahead for Theranos. I mean, just in terms of presenting this mission, as you call it, to not only a larger scale, because that in itself is pretty formidable, but take us through maybe how you envision the steps to get where you want to get.
I think it's about, fundamentally it's about ensuring that we do everything so that every person who comes to our locations and who we serve has a wonderful experience and a high integrity experience. And we will scale around that, right? So we can't scale until we know that we've built a system that meets our expectations in terms of what we want to see with respect to quality of service, with respect to providing a wonderful experience for people that changes their whole relationship with getting access to this information, and that realizes the levels of quality that we're holding ourselves to. And if we can do that in one location and we can do it really, really well, then we can do it in another location. And when we've met those standards there, then we can do it in another location. And that's how we think about it. So we've been building a model in Arizona which allows us to understand the operational elements of this in detail. And we will systematically replicate that. And the next 5 years are about being able to ensure that we can bring that level of service and that level of excellence to every person in this country.
So you have a blueprint.
Beyond. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There are also I know you've already become a model for so many young people, and particularly young women. What do you say when, especially young girls, ask you, how to chart their lives or how to blueprint their lives? What you've learned from your own experiences that could be valuable, let's say, to young people who want to emulate you?
It is such an important area, and if there is anything that I can do, especially in connecting with little girls about the fact that, we should be in science and technology, and it is a cool thing to do, and it's not hard, and you can excel in it in the same way in which you can excel in so many of these other areas. I had a conversation with the CEO of the Girl Scouts, and she was telling me that they took all the valedictorians of their group, and they sat them down in a room, and they said, raise your hand if you think you're going to be a leader in technology business. And none of them raised their hand. And she said, we were shocked. These girls are valedictorians of their classes. And they spent all this time looking at it. And she said that they didn't have enough role models to be able to see themselves in those positions. And I've always believed that, everywhere there's a glass ceiling, there's an iron lady right underneath it. And the more that we can demonstrate that, I would never have been able to do what I've done in probably any other part of the world, but in this country, you can do this. You can drop out of school as a 19-year-old girl and create something, that starts with a dream and becomes, a product, becomes a company. And that's how we've built this country. And so being able to communicate that it is possible and that it can be done, I think can't be done enough. And I have the privilege now to start doing that in some schools, and I will do everything that I can to help people see that because it's real, right?
And also to make science and math more accessible for young girls. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was the only girl in my electrical engineering classes at Stanford and a lot of my chemical engineering classes, and that was not that long ago, So.
Yeah, we have a number of people who have questions for you. Let me just go to some of these and bring them in. You could have chosen any path into personal health care. Why a blood test?
Blood test because it plays such a huge role in in clinical decision making, right? So 80% of clinical decisions are associated with laboratory data. If you don't have the laboratory data, you're going to have a very difficult time making an effective clinical decision.
When you talk about all your belief in technology, and when you talk about saving people's lives and making sure that they live as long as they're supposed to, just curious to know, this may seem a little bit of an offbeat question, but what you think about all this research that Ray Kurzweil and others are doing to keep extending longevity?
I think it's great. Let's make it work. You know, I think that the human body is incredibly powerful, and the more we understand it, the more we can leverage it. I mean, so much of the research that's happening right now, whether it's in cancer or other areas, is about channeling your own immune system to be able to fight some of these diseases. So I think we're just at the beginning of a massive revolution there.
There's some more questions. Somebody in the audience says, it's nice to have the raw data about my own blood, but wouldn't I need a trained medical professional to tell me what it means and what actions to take? Remember 23andMe. I think you've said publicly on a number of occasions, you don't mean to shut out the physicians here. They are going to be an important part of your...
They're a critical part, and we've built our whole infrastructure around serving and engaging with physicians. And I think it's really important to separate the legal question of, do I have a right to information about my body, from what do I do with it? Because 40 to 60% of people in our country do not go get their tests done when they're given a requisition by a physician.
Excuse me, Elizabeth, I've seen that figure a number of times. You said
Yeah.
40 to 60, and some disputed, some say it's more like 30, or do you know the source of that? 40?
I do. It's a study by Lewin that was published, but it's also, we've done a ton of research on this, because the people who come into our locations, it come in with years worth of lab requisitions, right? And so we say to them, well, why now, right? And it's because they couldn't afford it. It's because they were terrified of needles and other reasons. So if you can engage people, if you can give them the right to begin getting tested, the way that the physician can provide care is transformed. Because right now, they're often providing that care with people who are not compliant with getting a lab test done. And so, you know, we've built electronic systems and infrastructure to be able to get that data to physicians and to be able to engage people with their physicians. But getting them tested in the first place is the first barrier that we're trying to help get over.
You've become, at least on paper, very wealthy as a result of this whole enterprise of yours. And I know that must have wrought some changes in your life. It can't help but do that sort of thing. I mean, even there's another Michael Krasny who started CDW Computers, who's a billionaire and one of the richest men in the country, and they had him in Forbes, they had my picture, so I know.
That's very
true. So in my own small way, I've had to deal with this.
How'd that go?
But in your case, I get the feeling, and tell me if I'm completely on the wrong track here, and I'm going to, say this anyway, because it may be on the wrong track, it may be a bit of an impertinent question. I get the feeling that the money isn't even that important to you.
No, and my life actually hasn't changed. I mean, my life is the same. I'm still at the office 7 days a week, and you know, that's what I do. Yeah, I think what's changed has absolutely nothing to do with money. It's that we started talking about this mission just over a year ago, and what that's meant is that we've had the opportunity to connect with people, and that's changed my life profoundly, because I've been able to see this applied in ways in which it touches and helps people at a very deep level. And if we can keep doing that and engaging with people, then
you would do this work even if you were getting modest rewards for it.
I did for 10 years. Yeah, absolutely.
Get to as many questions as I can here for your questions for Elizabeth. Without FDA approval, how do you launch at Walgreens, and how much support or credibility do you have among medicine doctors?
So we're a certified lab, a high complexity CLIA certified lab, just like all the other labs that provide lab testing. And that means that we get audited on an ongoing basis, and we do what's called proficiency testing, which is where you're sent, for example, 20 blinded samples for every test that you run on an ongoing basis throughout the year, and you have to get the right answer. Otherwise, if you don't, over time, you can lose your license. And that's the laboratory framework today. Our experience in working with the physician community has been to say, try us, right? Test us, use this, let your patients have some experience with it, compare it to the infrastructure that you're using, and that's worked pretty well. And we have a wealth of data. We've been doing this for a long time in the context of building this company, which we engage in with the physicians we serve.
Actually, I've got I almost said a listener here. Well, you are a listener. So. I get up here in these conversations and I almost go on automatic pilot and I say, you can tweet us, you can go to our Facebook page. One more question from the audience. Are there applications specifically for the developing world?
Yeah, there's tremendous applications, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the lack of infrastructure in so many of these countries. And when you think about the pursuit of education or economic development in these areas, I've had so many conversations with people who are trying to, for example, pursue education in some of these areas, and you can't really do that successfully if you don't have basic health. But there's no basic health infrastructure, and if we can, through our commitment to doing whatever it takes to drop the price of laboratory testing, make it possible to take incredibly low-cost tests into these areas so that people do have access to it, then we can help to begin building that type of health infrastructure, and we're really committed to that.
We're coming near the end of the time that we have. What do you do for fun?
I do Theranos. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
My curiosity always serves me to at least try to find out a great deal about the people that I have the great privilege of being in conversation with, and I also trust my instincts, having, at this stage of my career, probably interviewed more people than most interviewers. I must say, you are an extraordinary woman, and it's been an amazing young woman, and it's been a real pleasure to share the stage with you, and I want to thank everybody for your attention. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm very humbled by that.
The technology behind Theranos could put hundreds of medical tests as close as your fingertip. There are hundreds of stories like this at the Computer History Museum. Join us next time for the Computer History Museum presents Revolutionaries.